Okay, Pesachim Daf Kaf Bet. We're going to be talking really about quite an interesting and important topic. It is Chanukah, and we just said Hanarot Hala the Kodeshem. We certainly can't eat them, but we don't even derive benefit from them. So in that spirit, we're going through all different isurim in the Torah. We're going to talk about this today and the next couple of dafim as well, and ask a really fundamental question. There's lots of prohibitions that say you can't eat this and that. Here's just a few of them and even more. Whenever we do read about a prohibition against eating, what should we assume about benefiting in other ways, like by selling it or feeding it to our animals or anything like that? So should we assume that eating means just eating, but otherwise you can do anything you want with it? That might be a simple Peshat reading. I was trying to think if there's any Torah law that explicitly says you can't have any benefit from. I can't think of any. I mean, maybe Pesach, where it says lo bal yadeh bal yamaseh, you can't even have it around, and certainly you won't be able to benefit from it. So where would there be any hint that it would be a problem? And so we saw that last time that Rabbi Abhu learns it from the fact that in one law or a couple of laws, it does say that you are allowed to give it to a goy or to a ger or to that's for nevela or terefa, that you can give it to a dog. So Rabbi Abhu says as follows. Therefore, from these examples, we see that everywhere else it means that you cannot derive benefit. Which can be grammatically correct. Lo tochilu, don't eat means don't consume, don't interact with it, don't have any benefit from it all, not just physically eating. And when it's exceptional, the Torah goes out of its way to tell you, nevela, terefa, those you can. We try to learn from nevela, that's one possibility, but we see that there was one opinion that says, no, the law of nevela teaches you something specific. Rabbi Yehuda says that you should give it as a gift to a resident alien or sell it to a foreigner, and you do one or the other. So that pasuk we can't really learn from, according to that interpretation, because it's telling you something specific. And so maybe in general you can't get benefit, but in addition, in this law, you have to give it to this particular party. And so therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he can still learn it from terefa, which is give that to the dog. Either way, the point is that there are these couple of exceptions that prove the rule and show that everywhere else, with the standard, the default is all verbs mean benefit. That's the opinion of Rabbi Abhu. Is much more strict in that way. The Hizkiah, however, has a different way of thinking about it. He looks at the grammar of the verbs. If it says do not eat, lo tochelu, in the active, then that means eat. If it says a passive, right, lo ye'achel, it shall not be eaten, then that's more inclusive. It should not be consumed in any way. So that's the basic outline regarding chametz on Pesach. It says lo ye'achel, and so that's a passive verb, and so therefore, according to Hizkiah, you cannot get benefit from Pesach, from chametz, because of the verb. According to the Abhu, it doesn't matter. No matter what the verb is, you cannot derive benefit. So they agree regarding chametz. They agree regarding nevela that it's okay to derive benefit from it. Actually, in practice, they're going to agree on most things. The question is, how do they derive it? And so now we're going to test out, especially the Abhu, but some of the questions will be on Hizkiah as well. haNasheh, and then the prohibition of consuming blood, and then the limb from a live animal, and then killer animals, and then Orlah. We'll go through these 5 topics, and we'll see how how to be Abhu especially, and some of them how Hizkiah will interpret them. All right, so we start with haNasheh. Metiv Rabbi Yitzchak Napacha. Vare haNasheh derachamana amad al ken lo yochelu bnei Israel et haNasheh. So here we have an active verb, right? It shall not be eaten. According to Hizkiah, that means only eating. Benefiting is fine. Now, what is the halacha regarding the haNasheh in terms of benefit? Utnan, sholech adam yarech legoy, haNasheh betocho mipnei shemekomo nikar. The halacha says you are allowed to send a part of an animal, a leg of an animal, with the haNasheh inside. And you don't have to worry that the goy might resell it to a Jew, because its place is clear, right? If when you take it out, it's clear that it was taken out. If it's not taken out, if he resells it, that's fine. The Jew will know. The point for us is that you are allowed to sell a gid haNasheh to a non-Jew. In other words, you're allowed to derive benefit from it. Okay, so this part works fine for Hizkiah because he says it's an active verb. That means only eating is prohibited, but benefiting is okay. However, this is a question on Rabbi Abhu. According to Rabbi Abhu, all verbs tell you that it's prohibited in making and benefit in hana'ah, and so therefore, why are you allowed to send it to a non-Jew? Good. That is the question. Answer. Kasavar Rabbi Abhu kesheutra nevela hi vechelba vegida hutra. His answer is that, well, where is the sciatic nerve? It's in the animal, right? It's in the, so this is included as part of nevela. We saw before that nevela, an animal that died on its own, non-kosher animal that is dead, right, is permitted to have benefit from, and therefore the gid haNasheh, which has a particular prohibition, is still included in the as part of the animal, and therefore, since the rest of the animal is also permitted in hana'ah, so too the gid haNasheh is permitted in hana'ah. So that's why it's exceptional. All right, good. That works partially. Let's see. That works according to the opinion that says that the gid haNasheh has taste. If it has taste, then it's meat, right? It's considered food. And so therefore it's part of the rest of the animal, and all of the meat of any nevela is permitted by hana'ah, so to the gid haNasheh is part of the edible animal. Then that makes sense. But there is another opinion that we'll see in a second that says gidin don't taste like anything. They're not edible, and therefore they would not be included under the category of nevela. And then how would you know that it is prohibited, that is permitted in hana'ah, right? Because if it just says don't eat it, specifically don't eat it, then we would think, according to the Rabbi Abhu, that it means don't have benefit as well. Okay, so that is the question, and now we'll see these two opinions. Man shemat ledamad en begidin b'noten tam, Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon, he is the author of that opinion that says that there is no taste to any gidim, so they're not edible. Detanya ha'ochel migid haNasheh shel behema time'ah, Rabbi Yehuda mechayev shetayim, but Rabbi Shimon poter. Rabbi Shimon says it's fine because it's not food. Rabbi Yehuda says you violate two things. Number one, it's a behema time'ah. It's a non-kosher animal, so you ate non-kosher. Second, it's a gid haNasheh, so you violate two things. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, this is food, and therefore it is considered part of the animal. It's meat, flesh of the animal. So you're eating non-kosher food, and you are eating, in fact, the gid haNasheh also. But according to Rabbi Shimon, since it's not food, it's not considered unkosher even, and so he says there's no problem with that. Gid haNasheh only applies to a kosher animal. All right, that's interesting. And that way he's more lenient. However, Rabbi Shimon hachinami da'asar b'hana'ah. Detanya gid haNasheh mutar b'hana'ah divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon said he's more lenient in terms of eating in a non-kosher animal, but that same Rabbi Shimon is more strict when it comes to deriving benefit. The Tanakama of this Baraita says you can derive benefit. That's the majority opinion that we assumed before, the Mishnah before also. But Rabbi Shimon says, no, you cannot derive benefit from it. And therefore, we have an answer no matter which way you go. So Rabbi Abhu's his first answer was, since it's, if you follow the opinion that that it has taste, so then it's part of the nevela, it's part of the animal, then it's nevela, and nevela is allowed to have benefit from it. So to the gid haNasheh, that's part of this nevela, you're allowed to have benefit from it. And so therefore it's exceptional. And if you follow the other opinion that en begidin b'noten tam, that they have no taste, well, that's Rabbi Shimon. And as a matter of fact, according to Rabbi Shimon, you cannot derive benefit from it. So you're right. If you don't think it's part of nevela, then in fact it would be prohibited from benefit. So that works very well for Rabbi Abhu. All right, so we solved that one. Now we go to the next case. V'harei dam. Darachamana amad kol nefesh mikem lo tochal dam. This is an active verb. Do not eat blood. According to Hizkiah, that's perfectly fine. It means you cannot eat, but you can derive benefit. So that's good. But according to the Abhu, lo tochal means even benefit. How the problem is, we have a Mishnah that is going to show that you are allowed to benefit from blood. Utanan. Elu ve'elu mit'arabin ba'ama v'yotzin le'nachal kidron v'nimkarin lagannanin lezebel u'mo'alin bo. In the Bet HaMikdash, we're talking about Kodesh blood that was poured onto the Mizbeach. Elu ve'elu refers to different types of korbanot. Sometimes it was sprinkled at different places. Sometimes it was poured on this side of the Mizbeach. Sometimes on the other side of the Mizbeach. But they all go down into one central conduit, and they mix together, and in an amma, some kind of aqueduct that took the blood from the Mizbeach outside, and it went down to Nachal Kidron. So normally it would just go and wash away, but they could also catch it because it's blood, and blood is useful as fertilizer. And they would sell it to gardeners, this blood as fertilizer. Now the gardeners would have to pay for it, and by paying for it, that money would go to the Bet HaMikdash, and it would undo the holiness of the blood. But the point is, as long as they pay for it, so then they're not mo'el ba'kodesh, they can derive benefit from it. So here you go. You can take blood and you can sell it and use it. So you are allowed to derive benefit. Rabbi Abhu, what are you going to do with this? You said that all verbs mean no benefit. But here we are allowed to have benefit from blood. His answer is, no, blood is different because we see that it is compared to water. See, for each and every example, Rabbi Abhu is going to have to give another exception. This is also an exception, and show why. And so where do we see that blood and water are compared? There's in Devarim where it's talking about if you kill an animal, a regular animal outside, shechitat chulin, even though you're allowed to do that, you cannot have the blood. The blood you must spill onto the ground like water. So you see that blood is like water. My mutarim, avdam mutar. Both are permitted to have benefit from it. You can benefit from water, you can benefit from the blood also. And so that's how we know that this is an exception to his rule. Well, and now not all water is permitted. We do nisuch hamayim on Sukkot, and that water is holy, and you can't benefit from that water. So why not compare it to that? Amar Rabbi Abhu, kamayim rov mayim. It says like water, like most water, not this one particular water that you do one time a year. You don't have to compare it to that. Midi rov mayim ketiv. Does it say, right? So we counter that. Does it say most water? It doesn't. Actually, it says kamayim. Kamayim has a hehayidiyah, not kemayim, not like any water. It's kamayim means like the water, which sounds like it's something specific. So that, maybe it is specifically prohibited water. Ela marav asher kamayim hanishpachin velo kamayim hanisachin. Right. So since the pasuk is comparing it, poured out on the floor like water, like what kind of water? Like water that you would be allowed to waste, like water that you pour out, and not like mayim that you would pour on the mizbeach. Nisuch hamayim. And so therefore we uphold that it is in fact comparable, blood is comparable to water. One more question on that. Wait, if someone takes water and offers it to idolatry, also that would be prohibited. So maybe it's that type of water, that's also pouring. No, even if you do something for idolatry, it's still called a libation. It's not a good libation, it's a prohibited libation, but still you'd use the word nesech, and you wouldn't use the word lishpoch. And so therefore lishpoch means to pour it onto the ground. Actually, if you look in Devarim, the next pasuk does talk about pouring blood on the mizbeach and use the word shafach. So maybe shafach can mean both, but nisuch means only one. And so therefore here we're assuming shafach means like regular water. Blood is therefore like regular water. Okay, good. Now we're going to turn the question around to Hizkiah. Well, Hizkiah, So now we do have this comparison. I mean, the Torah could have just said, blood is, don't eat it. Why does it have to say, pour it out on the ground like water? So for Rabbi Abhu, that's coming to teach you that, just like water you can derive benefit, so too blood you're out to derive benefit. But Hizkiah doesn't need that teaching because according to Hizkiah, it's an active verb, lo tochelu dam. And so then I know that it's only prohibited to eat. It's okay to benefit. So why?
Rabbi, excuse me.
Yeah.
Isn't our teacher kind of mine talking about kisui hadam, that with haya you don't have to do kisui hadam?
That's a different pasuk, right? So in the Torah it says chayot and birds you have to do kisui hadam. It does not say that about behema, right? That's super interesting because in the temple scroll when it's reviewing it, it adds kisui hadam to behemot also because they want to harmonize it, right? But the rabbis in fact stick with the pashat and don't harmonize, and that is halacha l'maaseh. We don't have to do kisui hadam for animals, only for birds and chayot. Yeah, but anyway, they all get, the point is that you can't drink it. It's got to be poured out on the ground. I mean, there is something to that, poured on the ground, meaning don't use it for anything else. Hold on, now you're just making me think that they use it for fertilizer. Well, they're pouring it out onto the ground, right? So at least get some benefit in that way. But not only that, they're actually also selling it, so they are deriving benefit from selling. Okay, anyway, according to Hizkiah, what's he going to do with that comparison? He doesn't need it to learn that it's prohibited to benefit from blood. He already knows that. לכת דרבי חייא בר אבא, אמר רבי חייא בר אבא, אמר רבי יוחנן, מניין לדם קדשים שאינו מכשיר, שנאמר לא תאכלנו, על הארץ תשפכנו כמים. Rabbi Yochanan derives from this that blood that is holy, and any blood that comes from a sacrificial blood, it does not make something prepared for tum'ah. Right? Don't get traumatized by the last 7 dapim, but it actually is interesting that this second chapter is referring to something in that section in the first chapter, and you wonder about the editing, right? If the Talmud here knew that you already know this, or put that there so that it'll introduce and you'll have this concept that as you need it here. Okay, anyway, the point is that it's learning that only dam shenishpach kamayim machshir, she'eno nishpach kamayim eno machshir, regular blood outside the Bet HaMikdash, that's poured out like water, that acts like water. Just like water, when it touches food, it makes the food able to receive tumah. So too, blood outside the Bet HaMikdash prepares food to receive tumah. But blood that is not poured like water, in other words, and specifically the initial blood that spurts out when you do shechita, that's the blood that's caught in a bowl and that would be sprinkled on the mizbeach. That has a special status, and even if it falls on food, it does not make the food prepared to receive tumah. That's what he'll learn from it. Okay, good. So we finished the topic of blood. Now, next topic is v'harei even min hachai dichtiv lo tochal hanefesh im habasar. An active verb. Do not eat a limb from an animal that is alive, and a limb cut from a living animal. And of course, this applies not only to Jews, but also to non-Jews. This is one of Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach. So here, according to Hizkiah, lo tochal, active verb, right? So you can derive benefit from it. But let's see, what about Rabbi Abhu? Betanya, Rabbi Natan Omer, minayin shelo yoshit adam kos yayin lenazir. That's the end of the Braita. We learn from that, one should not take wine. Wine is permitted for most people, but not to a Nazir. Don't offer a cup of wine to a Nazir. It's not nice. You're going to make him sin. And similarly, do not offer ever minachai to a non-Jew, because he's also not prohibited. If you do that, then you're putting a stumbling block before a blind person. So that seems the only reason why you cannot offer ever minachai to a non-Jew is because of the stumbling block, right? But not because of you can't derive benefit. It's that specific one. But how about to a dog? A dog is allowed to have ever minachai, and therefore that would be allowed. You are allowed to benefit from ever minachai. That's a question on Rabbi Abhu, because according to him, lo tochal means don't eat and don't derive benefit. So how's he going to square this one away? Shan ever minachai di'itkash ledam. Oh, ever minachai is compared to dam, and we already talked about dam. Dam is compared to water. Tichtib rak chazak lebelti achol hadam ki hadam hu hanafesh. There you go. It's the nefesh. So when it talks about menachai, it says lo tochal hanefesh. Don't eat something that is part of a living being. And the blood also, the blood is the life force of the animal, and therefore the laws of blood will transfer and apply also to Ever Minachai, and teach that is permitted to have benefit from. Okay, good. So we need that for Rabbi Abhu. According to Hizkiah, we already know that it's an active verb, so I already know that it doesn't apply to benefit. So what's he going to do with the comparison with blood? Well, Hizkiah, l'mayil chatayit katash ever minachai ledam, malecha dam hu di'itkash le'ever minachai. Ma ever minachai asur, afdam min hachai asur. He's going to do the other way around, actually. He's going to say it's blood that is going to learn something from Ever Min Hachai. Just like Ever Min Hachai is prohibited, a limb from a live animal, right, is not allowed, so too blood from a live animal is prohibited. Which would be blood from bloodletting. Sometimes they did bloodletting on animals as well. We saw that in the previous Perek, right? That if you take out sufficient amount, then it would die. We're not talking about that when you take out that much, but you take out a certain amount. I think this is the Mongols used to do this when they would travel long distances in the cold and hard to find food. They actually drew blood from their horses and would drink the blood. Kept them strong and courageous. But that is not allowed to do, and so we learn that from a comparison with Ever Minachai. Okay, so that's what Hizkiah would do with it. All right, and now the next topic, V'hareh shor haniskal, an ox that gores and kills a man or a woman, that ox gets stoned. Derachamana amar lo ye'achel et besaro. And it says there, lo ye'achel. Okay, now it's getting interesting because here we have a passive verb. After you stone the animal, it's dead. That meat cannot be eaten. And now since it has a passive verb, now we're in agreement. Rabbi Abhu and Hizkiah will both say that this means that you're not allowed to get benefit from shor haniskal. Well, let's see what the halacha is regarding it. V'tanya, mimashmash nemar sakol yisakel hashor, eni yodea shehi nevela, unvela asura bachila. This is actually a very good question, right? You're doing sekila on this animal. You're not doing shechita on it. Why do you have to tell me I can't eat it? Would anybody think that I'm allowed to take this animal? It killed a person. Okay, we bring it to court, right? And we judge, okay, you are liable to death. And then we kill the animal by stoning. Well, is anybody going to think it's kosher? Right? You didn't do shechita, so obviously you can't eat it. Why does that pasuk have to come and say that you're not allowed to eat this animal? So lo ye'achel, magid lecha katuv shim shechato le'achar shenigmar et dino asur. If you did do shechita after it was sentenced to death, but before they actually killed it, right? So I'll say I own a shor. This is talking about a shor tam, by the way, that does this, right? And so we take it to court, right? It's sitting there in the defendant box. The judges say you're chayav mita. Then they take it, right? It's okay. Tomorrow, you're right. You're death sentence tomorrow. The owner, in the meantime, says, "Oh, maybe I'll have a steak tonight," and does shechita on it beforehand. Kosher shechita. You're not allowed to benefit from it, right? The owner doesn't get killed in this case because it's a short time, but he can't benefit as well from this animal. So that's what it's talking about. Now, this is still the braita. All the braita. So I only know eating. What about benefiting? Tamodomar ubal hashor nakir. The end of the pasuk says that the owner of the ox is clean, innocent. Now the peshat of that means that you don't give any punishment because it's a short time. The owner is like, I didn't expect that it's going to go crazy and kill a person, so the owner is off the hook, as opposed to shor muad, where the owner also deserves a death penalty. He can pay ransom instead, but technically does deserve it. Okay, that's the pshat of the words Baal Shor Naki, but this midrash is going to add something else. Umay mashma. שמעון בן זומא אומר, כאדם שאומר לחברו, יעשה פלוני נקי מנכסיו, ואין לו בהם הנאה shel kilum. It's more like a phrase when you say, the person's cleaned out. That person, it means that the person has no more money, right? And so this teaches Baal Lashon Naki means that the owner may not derive any benefit from it. Right? So, and he says, similar to a person who has no money, we say he's cleaned out. And so according to this Baraita, we, in fact, Shor HaNiskal is prohibited from Hana'ah, which is good. The problem is that we're deriving it from the words Ubal HaShor Naki. So, Tama dechatav Ubal HaShor Naki. Di'i mi lo ye'achel, isur achila mashma, isur hana'ah lo mashma. So this baraita actually ends up being a problem, even though it actually says isur hana'ah, because both according to Rabbi Abhu and according to Hizkiah, the passive verb lo ye'achel means asur b'hana'ah, and therefore we should be able to learn it just from this pasuk that I cannot, the owner cannot, and no one can benefit from a shor haniskal. Instead, this baraita learns it from Baal Hashor Naki. Why does it have to do that? Why don't you learn it from the beginning? Okay, that's the question. Answer is Le'olam lo yachel isur achila ve'isur hana'a mashma. Ubaal Hashor Naki lanat orohu de'ata. He says, no, you're right. You know what? In fact, we're going to follow Rabbi Abhu and Hizkiah's methodology. From lo yachel, we derive that you cannot eat or derive benefit from the flesh of the animal. But that, I would only know the flesh of the animal. The part that you cannot eat, you also cannot sell. But what about the skin? You don't eat the skin. And that's why I have to say, Baal Shor Naki, he can't even get benefit from the skin of the animal. That's what is coming to add. And it makes sense because I can't eat the flesh. So whatever I cannot eat, that's what I cannot have benefit from it. But I might have thought the skin would be okay, and that's why I need Baal Hashor Naki. That answers the question for both. A little more on this. There's another opinion, not that it's to teach us the skin, but rather Baal Hashor Naki teaches us something else. Lechasi kofed v'lidmeh veladot. You might have thought that since it's a shor tam that does damages, the owner has to pay half. So you might have thought that a shor tam that kills also has to ransom himself for half. Or that if he kills a pregnant woman, that he has to pay for the fetus that was killed. And so, therefore, Baal Hashor Naki teaches you that he is innocent. He does not have to pay those things for a shor tam. So, according to that, then we're using Baal Hashor Naki to teach these things. And then how would he know? Hana'at oro minalehu. How would he know that this thing that you just added, that the hide also, you cannot derive benefit from it? Nafka lehu me'et besaro, et hatafel libsaro. Oh, so from the beginning pasuk that says et besaro, the word et comes to include also not just his flesh, but also something else, and that would be that which is secondary to the flesh, in other words, the hide. Okay, ve'idach. And what about the other opinion, right? The other opinion that didn't use the pasuk, right, for these extra things, but rather use the naki, Baal Hashor Naki for hide. Why would he need et in the pasuk? La darish et lo darish. He doesn't think et is an extra word. It's necessary grammatical word, and he generally, follows the methodology that et is not significant enough, and you do not learn new things from et. Okay, and here is the source. This is a very famous midrash, very important midrash about deriving things from the word et. Kedetanya, Shimon ha'amasoni, v'amri leNechemya ha'amasoni, haya doresh kol etim shebat Torah. This is an early sage, and he took it upon himself to say et is an extra word. I'm going to go through every single et in the entire Torah and show why it's necessary, what it's something that is adding to. So he spent a long time, a big effort doing this. Kevan she'egia le'et Adonai Elohecha tira peresh. You got this pasuk, right? You have to fear God. Well, what are you going to add to this? What can you compare to the fear of God that you can add also this? And he realized that his entire project was impossible. And so he ripped up his manuscript, he threw it out. Says, teacher, your rabbi, you've been teaching us all this time about every et, all this Torah. What about everything else that you taught us? right? I mean, you're just gonna get rid of it. Malahem keshem shekibalti sachar al hadirisha, kach ani mekabel sachar al haperisha. Right, very famous aphorism. Just like I received reward for seeking it out and learning all these things, so too I will receive reward on withdrawing myself and saying that they're wrong. This is important for every scholar. Sometimes you put a lot, years of effort into a certain theory, and then turns out to be wrong. Right, and some people never want to give up on it. They're going to still, advance the theory, even though when everything's against it. But this is an important principle. As just as important as advancing a theory is withdrawing it if you when you realize it's wrong. And so he withdrew all of his scholarship. Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva, I should have waited though. Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva v'darash et Adonai Elohecha tira lerabot tamidei chachamim. Rabbi Akiva said that word et can in fact include something, just as we have to fear God. That the et comes to include fearing, giving respect to Torah scholars. That it's through them that we learn in the first place what it means to fear God. They embody the teachings, the values of the Torah, and so therefore it's through the awe that we have for Talmidei Chachamim that is a conduit for fearing Hakadosh Baruch Hu as well. Okay, very beautiful and very deep teaching. And anyway, we see here that there were two methodologies. Some did derive something from every et, and some did not. Okay, and last topic for today. Orlah, a new tree that you plant during its first 3 years. Orlah, same as the word for circumcision, right? This is prohibited for those first 3 years, any fruit that it produces. Now here it says lo ye'achel, that's a passive verb. So everyone agrees, Hizkiah and Rabbi Abhu, that this should mean that it's prohibited for hana'ah. But the halacha, according to this braita, v'tanya, arelim lo ye'achel, en li ela isur achila, minaim shelo yehane mimenu, shelo yisba bo, v'lo yadlik bo et haner, tamod lomar, va'araltem orlato. So this pasuk, lo ye'achel, teaches me only that it cannot be eaten. How do I know that I also cannot derive benefit, that I can't turn it into a dye to dye clothing with, or I cannot turn it into a burning material and use it for fuel? Therefore, the rest of the pasuk, it says another twice more, Araltem orlato, it should be prohibited. Arelim lo yachel lerabot et kulam. So we see here that right. So right. So actually, it's beginning of the pasuk. So we have all three of them. What lo yachel teaches you don't eat it. The other ones teach you don't have benefit from it. Okay. So actually, we're all in agreement that we can't get benefit from it. The problem is with their methodology, since they both said that you can learn from the verb itself, not only eating but also not deriving benefit. Then what do you need? Those would be extra words. The braita, you see, goes against their methodology. How are they going to answer this? That's all part of the question. Answer, lo olam lo ya'achel mashma ben isur achila ben isur hana'a. V'shanei hatam dichtiv lachem. Oh, so really, if you only had lo ya'achel, and then it's true, I would know, in fact, that both eating and benefit is not allowed. The problem is that the pasuk adds another word, right? That is arelim, to you, lachem, to you, veis terich. So sakadetechamina v'vechatav lachem shalachem yehe kamash ma'lan. Since it says to you, it's for you. I might have thought that means that these things are prohibited to eat. Instead, they are for you, and you can derive benefit from it. You could use it for other things. So since it said that, that's why I had to also add v'araltem orlato, that is prohibited in benefit. So since we're ad lachem, you might have thought it's okay to benefit, has to add latem or lato. Now you might ask, don't write anything, don't write lachem, and then you don't have to write latem or lato. What's the purpose of writing lachem in the first place? Lachem lamali. Lachem lerabot et hanatua larabim. According to this opinion, the word lachem is teaching you in plural. Let's say you plant a public tree, right, in a public place. And how do I know that also no one is allowed to eat the fruit? That's why it says the word lachem, that to say even in public. So I need the word lachem to teach me that. Or the opposite. He says lachem means to you individually. Only your individual private trees are prohibited. A public tree, it's okay, you can eat. It's okay, it doesn't matter one way or another. The point is that we need the pasuk had to add lachem to teach me something about public and private trees. And once it added that word, it might have thought that lachem means that it's mine and I can benefit from it. And that's why I cannot assume that the eating verb lo yachel means benefit. The pasuk had to add other words to teach that as well. My ta'ama de tanakama. Now Tanakh said that lachem is for the public. Why does he think that? Dichtib un ta'tem liyachid mashma l'rabim lo mashma. Un ta'tem sounds like it's talking about you individually. So therefore, katab lachamana lachem la'abir tanatua l'rabim. So you have an individual verb and then a public verb. So that says not only individual, also public. All trees you can't eat them. That's how he derived it. Rabbi Yehuda says un tatem mashma ben rabim ben yachid. No, tatem is actually plural. It's talking about everyone, even public trees. And then velachem ben yachid ben rabim mashma. So now we have a redundancy. All trees of even the public. And then again, all your trees, even the public. Why would you have to add an inclusive phrase after a second inclusive phrase after yet a first inclusive phrase? What are you coming to include even more? So there's a rule that when you include twice, then the second one actually means the opposite. You kind of protesteth too much. And so it actually comes to say, no, the opposite. So in this case, since you have untatem and then lachem comes to say, private trees, only private trees you cannot eat for the first 3 years, but public trees you are allowed to eat for those first 3 years. Okay, either way, the point is that the word lachem is necessary to teach me something about private trees, and therefore, but it's confusing because it could mean also lachem, it's yours to have for a benefit, and therefore the pasuk has to come and add Orlah tim orlato, that's a subana'a, and I cannot rely on the verb itself only. And so we saw now these 5 different prohibitions where in fact everybody agrees on what the halacha l'maaseh is, but they each show how the methodology can work. And tomorrow we'll see a few more cases of prohibitions about eating and whether or not they are also prohibited. Baruch Adonai l'olam, amen ve'amen.